Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to take the blade out of this very rare little #2 Stanley plane, and I'm going to be sharpening it on these diamond stones. And if you're not familiar with diamond stone sharpening, join the club, because there's lots of people out there who don't understand it, never tried it, and don't know much about it. And I was one of those people. But thanks to the nice people at M Power Tools who are sponsoring this video, they provided me with one of these sharpening stones, and I had a chance to learn about it, and it's changed my way of sharpening. So stick around and let's get started. So let's start off by showing you what I'm working with today. So first of all, I'm taking the covers off. This is the side-by-side diamond sharpening stone that I'm going to be working with. This covers and stone comes with this nice little bag here that also includes, of course, some instructions, and there's actually a wiping cloth as well included in that. In the front, very important, there is some lapping fluid, and of course you can get refills on those. And there's also some jewelers, what we call jeweler's rouge. These are like little polishing blocks. They're kind of a clay material. Polishing blocks, you're going to be using one of those, and a little eraser, because sometimes when you're sharpening here you might get some of the iron filings get in there. You may want to clean them up, and that's what you use. So let's get started and look at our plane. Now, some of this may be some review for some of you, but we're going to go through it anyway because it's not that long and it is important. So first of all, of course, we need to take the blade out, and that's the cap, and there's the blade and the breaker bar here, and the chip breaker. Take the chip breaker off of there because we don't really need that. And right there is the blade that we're going to be sharpening. Now, before we even sharpen a blade, the very first thing we want to look at is, in fact, the sole of the plane. And of course, the sole of the plane wants to be flat from end to end, but this area right in here, this is actually crucial to sharpening. Of course, we want, sharpening from side to side. Now, I've already done this plane, so this isn't going to take very long, but just to show you in plain sharpening, this is the first step. So this is where we take the lapping fluid and we just spray a little bit, not a lot, on, in this case I'm using the number 300. And all you do, you don't push hard with this stone. You just sort of let the tool do the work and just keep moving it around and around like that. And eventually you will get to a point where all of the marks that you put on there are going to come off. And rather than using the cloth, I'm using this so that you can actually see how much material that we get off. And you can see there's very little left there. And that's enough for me to know that this is flat, because if I keep going, I'll get rid of it altogether. But in all of these cases, all of these marks have been worn down. They're wearing off, and they're wearing off evenly. So I know that that's flat. In this case, I could also do a couple of passes on the 1200, but it's not really that important because now we can move along to the blade. Now, of course, the next thing is sharpening the blade. And if you're restoring old blades, which I've done in this case, this at the very top here, it's very important because some blades will have some etching on there. And this particular blade, this is a #2 Stanley that I'm working with. It's not a blade, it's not a plane that I would use regularly, because this is really more of a collector's plane. This is kind of a work of art. And this particular one is what they call a sweetheart, and there's a little heart-shaped thing with an SW in it, and it says Stanley on the top. Maybe I'll get a close-up of this for you in a little bit. But you don't want to destroy the patina of the blade, and you want to be able to make sure that you always can see that, because that's where the value of the blade or the plane is in that blade. But The next thing that I want to do, we want to make these, of course, a workable working plane because we may use it from time to time. And the very first thing we do is we need to make sure that the plane is flat, and we do that by flattening the back. Now this plane blade has already been done, but I want to show you why it's important to sharpen the back. So if this was say the front of the plane here, and some of these, especially wider ones, over the years they can get warped, and they can get a warp like this, or they can get a warp like that. Now you can imagine if you're trying to plane something and your blade is warped like this, you can see what's hitting the wood first of all is the center. So you're getting an uneven cut on the wood that you're planing. And the same is true if it was like this. If you were planing wood like this, of course, you're going to be getting cutting here and here. So that's why it's important to have a flat blade to start off with, because when you sharpen, of course, you're going to be sharpening the bevel on the front, and it's going to be flat because you're going to be sharpening it flat. So this particular plane had a hump on the top here. So what I've done, what we do to flatten blades, again, we go back in this case to the diamond stone, and we put a little bit of lapping oil. Years ago, we used to flatten the entire blade, but we don't need to do that. Some smart person, not me, discovered that if we use something like these very, very thin little steel rulers, what we can do is put the plane like that on the lapping stone, on the diamond stone, and just move it around back and forth like that, and that will flatten just the end, because all we need is this area down here to be flat. And if we put a little bit of marking on there, we can actually see as we go along. I'll put some marks on there, and again, this one's already been flattened, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time lapping it, but just so that you see how that works. Let's get that out of the way. And again, we don't put a lot of pressure on the diamond stones. We're just sort of letting the stones work, and just keep going and going. And eventually, look at that. We've got all of that off. Let me show you a close-up. There you go. You can see, and it's very close at this end, but all the way across. There's no marks on there. Now in this case, I am going to go to the 1200, so I'm going to spritz that a little bit, take my ruler over, and I'm just going to work on this. I'm not going to show you this whole process here because it's tedious, but what I'm doing now is just sort of polishing with 1200 grit. I'm just sort of polishing the back of that blade. Now I should also tell you, not everybody has these little steel rules, but look, you can use a razor blade. I've made this one dull just so that I don't cut myself with it and round it over the edges. But it does the same thing because it's very, very thin and it's easily accessible. So you could use something like that to make sure that your plane blades are, the backs are nice and flat. So I'm just going to process this for a little bit, and then we come back, we'll start working on the bevel. Now I've already set the bevel on this blade, and that angle is typically, you can't really see it when I put it face on there, but that angle is typically a 25-degree angle. And when I first got this plane, I wasn't confident that it was at that angle. And there's a variety of commercial jigs that you can get where you can actually set that up and do that. And I've done that, but now I don't need this jig anymore because whatever I do from here on in, I can do by hand. And I can do a good enough job by hand, even on a plane. If you feel uncomfortable with it, there's, as I say, there's a variety of jigs that you can get to hold the plane at that angle, and you'll obviously want to start off with, in most cases, we go for a 25-degree bevel, and you can go more or less. It depends what you're doing or what you want, but that's typically a general rule of thumb, and that's what I've set this one at. So today I want to show you with and without the jig. In this case I've changed the blade here. I have a different blade in here that I needed to do some work with anyway. So in this case I'm going to mark again. We mark this to see how much effort we're putting in here. And again I'm going to be starting off on the 300 grit, and I may not do the whole process here because again I just want to show you what we're doing. And again we put the blade, in this case we're putting the bevel down, and I'm just going to be moving it back and forth slowly over the stone, and it's going to keep moving it back and forth and checking on those marks, those scribe marks that I put on there, until they're all completely gone. And in that case I'll know that this blade has been set to the 25-degree angle. And if I look down on here I can actually see the iron filings from the blade building up on there, and that's why we use that lapping fluid. And you can see that that blade is off by quite a bit, but I've already sharpened the end of it. I just need to keep working on it. And again, I'm not going to do this all on camera here because it's just going to be too tedious, but I just wanted you to see what that process is. Once that's done, I would take that to, in fact, you don't even have to do the entire blade. In this case, I've got the very end done. Really all I need to do now, I could leave that the way it is. It doesn't have to be all the way across here. And then I could actually take that and move that just the way it is and move that over to the 1200, because the bottom end of that blade is already sharpened. So it's the very tip that's going to do the cutting that's critical. So we've already got the top flattened. We just need to make sure that the bottom, and again I can see the iron filings coming off there. Yeah, and that's super sharp, just like that. That is sharp, just like that. Now if I was using it without, and again in this case, where's the blade? There's my blade. I already have, this blade is already being sharpened and set, so I don't really have to mark this one. But all I would want to do now, and I can, by looking at it, and I can actually feel it, again I want to put some lapping fluid on there, and I can actually just set that just like that. And I don't need to do a lot of work on here because this blade has already been sharpened and already flat. I'm just really just tuning it up. And this is, after all my blades are set and done, this is all I've been doing for years and years. I just do a little bit of fine tuning like this, and I can see that that's nice and flat now. Now with this M-Power system that I'm working with today, it comes with these covers that I mentioned earlier, and if you look at the ends of them or the sides of them, this one here is 1800, and it says orange wax, and the other one says blue wax, and it's 5000. And I showed you earlier that they come with these little polishing blocks, and I believe these are clay, and they're a mild abrasive is what they are. They're like a jeweler's rouge, and it actually tells you right on these what to do. And it doesn't matter whether you put these on, whether you put it on that side and this side or switch back and forth, because you're going to be using the top of these. And what you do, for example, we're going to start off with 1800. So remember, we're doing 1800 here. We're going to turn it around here so you can see that. So we're going to be doing some stropping with 1800, and this is a leather on here, and it tells us what to put on here. In this case we're going to put on orange, and we just put some on like that. You don't need a ton of it on there. And now we can take our blade, and we don't have to do any marking on here, because all we're going to do, the first thing I like to do is strop the back, and basically what we're doing is just polishing it. And I typically have been using 10 swipes on this side, and that just adds an amazing polish to that, and you'll see it gets even better. Now we're fine tuning down to 1800 grit, and I'm going to do the same thing on the front. I'm just going to put a little bit more polish on there. And now again, same, we don't have to use any kind of a jig on there, and I'm going to pull it back 10 times on there. And you may need to go more, you may get away with less. And you always pull in the same direction. And you'll be able to see a little bit of a build up there, a little bit of polishing. And it's really hard to see, but I'm going to show you some close-ups of this later on. Okay, now that we've done the 18,000, now we're going to go to the 5,000, to the blue. And again, I'm going to put some polish on there. And you may not be able to see it that well on here because it's a different texture. And in this case, I do twice as many. I'm going to do 20 on this one. Yeah, it's just like a mirror. It's unbelievable. And the same thing, I'm just going to put a little bit more wax on there for the bevel. And again, I'm going to pull back 20 times. I think I've lost count there, but that's got to be 20 there. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but that's just like a mirror on there. That is unbelievable. I've never had blades this sharp. It's just unbelievable. Let's get a piece of paper out here so I can show you how sharp that is. So this is one of the tests we often do, is we take paper. I like to use colored paper because it doesn't make the camera meter go all squirrely, and just pull that across. And look at that. It's just like absolutely like a razor blade. It's just absolutely stunning what that is. And that's it. Okay, so I want to show you my plain blade sharpening kit. And of course it has this jig that I use from time to time. But in here I have, there's my 320, my 600, my 800, there's 1200, there's 1500. Underneath here I've got some 400. Yeah, that's 400. There's some 220, and there's some 600, some extra 600, and there's some more 220 down there. And underneath all of this, I have two absolutely flat tempered glass plates that I glue, and I have to use a spray adhesive, so you have to spray it on. First of all, I have to cut these to little strips like this, and you spray it on, you gotta let it sit, and then you apply it on there, make sure there's no bumps in it, it's nice and smooth. And of course I've got two of them because there's all sorts of different grits that I need to use, and they're all nice and super flat. And in the end, what I found out is that this system actually, for all the muss and fuss of all of that stuff, this actually gives me a better end result. My plain blades are sharper using this, and I can do it in 1/10 of the time. So I have some good news and I have some bad news with all of this. And the bad news is I'm going to have to go through all of my chisels and all of my plain blades and resharpen them. The good news is I'll be able to do it in about 1/10 the time that it takes to go through all this muss and fuss with all these different grits. And I'll actually get a sharper plain blade by using this system. So that's the way sharpening can turn out. Well, this concludes my video for today, and I hope for those of you who have watched this diamond stone sharpening sort of demystifies what sharpening with diamond stones is like. It really is not that difficult a process. In fact, if anything, it's actually simpler. At least this system is very much simpler. And my learning process for getting this done was longer. And that's why I wanted to do this video, was so that you could see just how simple it really is. It's not that complex and it's not that complicated. You don't need to be getting all sorts of different grits and different things like that. It really is a pretty simple system. I will leave links in the description box below. You'll be able to go to Empower and check out their tools, and there'll also be an article, and I'll have some links in that as well. You'll be able to go and see what that is, because they have a variety of different stones that you can get. The one that I have here is a 300 1200. You can also get a 600 1200 or a 300 600. It really depends what kind of woodworking you're doing and what kind of materials you're working with. I thought the 300 or the 300 1200 was perfect for me because well, you can see the results for it. So I'm Colin Kinnett for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.